So I want us to start on the revision on the micro. So what I want us to pick, the first topic, introduction, 3 topics. So we have introduction to economics, introduction to economics, we have demand and supply, and consumer equilibrium. Equilibrium. Just a minute to get something. 1 minute. Open August 2024 paper. Kindly open August 2024 paper as I get something. So we can be back. So I tend to focus on the first 3 topics. Introduction to economics, demand and supply, and consumer equilibrium. And consumer equilibrium. Have you opened the paper for August? Have we opened August paper? Have we opened that? Have we opened? If we have, then we respond to this. If we have, then you give me yes. Charity, have you? If you have, then you give Molimo a yes. Perfect. So I want us to look at the first question focusing on that. So that is August. Steps. So we're being told that explain 4 steps in scientific method. The first one is question 1A. Explain. The word is 4 steps in what's called in scientific method. 4 steps in the scientific method. 4 steps in the scientific method. Did you do those things? Did we discuss about the scientific method? Yes, we did. That is August 2025. August 2025, that's where we start. August 2025. Explain what's called 4 steps in scientific method. 4 steps in the scientific method. 4 steps in the scientific method. 4 steps in scientific method. Did you discuss this? Did you encounter this? Yes, we did. Did we cover this in topic 1? 4 steps in scientific method. So number 1 is identify what I call the problem. And you say for analysis. Identify what you call the problem for analysis as the first step. Instead, identifying the problem to be step. Identifying what I call the problem. You say to be studied. To be studied. So this basically entails identifying the problems to be studied. That is the first step. The second step, we call it formulating. Formulating what we call the hypothesis, formulating what you call the hypothesis. The second step is formulating hypothesis. Hypothesis is a tentative stroke untested. We call it tentative stroke what we call untested, an untested statement. That is what we mean by hypothesis. So now an hypothesis is what we call a tentative stroke what we call, this is micro revision. So whenever we talk about hypothesis, is what we call a tentative stroke untested statement, which attempts to explain, which say attempts to do what? To explain, which basically attempts to explain, we call it which basically attempts to explain how one thing is related to another. How one thing we say is related to another together. So the second is basically to formulate what we call an hypothesis. An hypothesis, I've said, is a tentative statement that explains how one thing relates to another. Nipatie yes if we are together. A tentative statement that basically explains how one thing relates to another. That's the second step. Together. Nipatie yes kama tuko pamoja. How one thing relates with another. Give me a yes if we're together. A tentative statement that basically explains how one thing relates to another. And if you check our notes, you should be able to find this, how one thing basically relates to another. Then you have the next, number 3. We have it is data collection, and we call it an analysis. Data collection and what we call analysis. Next is what we call data collection. So you go into the field to collect data based on the problems. So you go into the field, this one you go into the field, you collect the data, you go into the field, you collect the data based on the problem so as to make prediction. Collect data, what do you call the data, in what's called in the field, based on the problem, based on what's called on the problem. So as to make what you call the prediction. So as to do what? To make what you call the prediction. So as to make the prediction. So if the prediction is correct, it becomes a theory. If the prediction we say is correct, we say then it becomes what you have as a theory. So if the prediction is correct, then it basically becomes a theory. Then you say the hypothesis is tested. The last statement, we say that the hypothesis we say is tested. So we test the hypothesis. So if it's supported, we say if supported. And the one is by actual evidence, by what's called actual. If supported by what's called the actual evidence, we have what we call a successful. We have what's called a successful theory. If it's supported by what's called the actual evidence, we have a successful theory, or what's called a law. Then we have what's called a law. So that is okay for that. Is that question supported? Perfectly well. Is that question perfectly done? Give it a yes if that question is perfectly done. Kama hiyo swali is perfectly done, we respond to the yes. So that is question 1A. Give me a yes. I want us to move to the next question. For the same question 1, August, we have 1D. 1D. If you're there, we respond with a yes. 1D talks about highlight 4 limitations of production possibility frontal curve. Highlight 4 limitations of what we call a production possibility, and we have it as frontal. So that is a PPF curve. Highlight what we call 4 limitations of what we have as production possibility curve. Are we there? If you're there, in yes, highlight for 4 limitation of production possibility frontal curve. Highlight 4 limitations of production possibility frontal curve. Did you talk about that in class? Tafadhali mzoe kuitika tafadhali. Did you talk about that in class? Yes. Just learn the art of responding. If you don't respond, then we are not doing anything. Did you talk about limitations of the production possibility frontal curve? Did you talk about limitations? Yes, we did. Then we have inability to compare more productions, because there are only 2 codes. Inability. So one is inability. And you say to compare. Inability to basically compare more products. More products. So you know, let's assume that there are only 2 products altogether. So we have consider only 2 goods. This considers only 2 goods. Considers only 2 goods. So that's the first limitation. It does what? It does consider only 2 goods altogether. Inability to consider technological difference. Inability, the next we call it inability to do what? To consider. Inability basically to consider what we call technological difference. Technological difference. Inability to basically consider what we call technological difference. Inability to consider what we call technological difference. It assumes that technology is constant. It assumes that technology, the word is that technology, we say, is constant. It basically assumes that technology is constant altogether. Then we say the changes in the source. The second, we understand the changes in the source available can shift. So the changes in resources available can shift. The PPF curve can shift what's called the PPF curve. Can shift the PPF curve, which is not reflected in static graph, which is not, we say, reflected in what's called in the static graph, which we understand is not reflected in the static, which is basically is not reflected in the static graph. Then you can have what we call it does not account for consumer preferences. Does not, the word is account. We say for the consumer, it doesn't account for consumer preferences or demand for goods, or what's called or the demand for goods. So this doesn't account for consumer preference or what's called the demand for goods. When producing a combination of goods, let's say when producing what you call a combination of what you call of goods, when producing what's called a combination of goods, consumer demand must be, we say that consumer demand, we say must be, consumer demand must also be considered, must also be considered. Consumer demand must also be considered. Consumer demand must also be considered. But lastly, as a limitation, we have limited scope of analysis. What you have is limited scope of what we call of analysis. It has what we call limited scope of analysis altogether. It has what we call limited scope of analysis. So those are the limitations of PPF card. It only considers two goods. Then you consider more than two goods. Tafadhali, if you're there, we'll respond with a yes. To the next question we go, because we're discussing about three topics. We go to question 2. Outline 4 determinants of elasticity of labor. No, that is under the supply of labor. That is under theory of production. You can leave that. But you can discuss this general. We'll talk about 6 roles of government in an economy. 6 roles. We discuss 6 roles of government. That is 2C. Discuss what you have as 6 roles of what you call of the government. 6 roles of the government, and you say in an economy. 6 roles of the government, and you say in an economy. That is more of a general question. 6 roles of the government in an economy. 6 roles of government in an economy. Roles of government in an economy. 6 roles of government in an economy. That is C. So promote and secure competition, promote and secure competition. They basically regulate competition. Which can promote and secure competition. Then they provide for equity. By taxation is equity. Provide for what you call for equity. The tax only those that have more. Are we together? So the provision of equity, they close the gap between the rich and the poor. That's why you find the government supporting the poor. But you can also talk about protect against externalities like pollution. Protect, we say against. The word is against externalities. Externalities, and you say such as pollution. Protect against externalities such as pollution. Then you can also talk about stabilize growth in the economy. They basically do what? Stabilize what you have as growth in what you call in the economy. They stabilize what you call growth in the economy. Then say protect what you call private property right. Protect what you call private property right. So these are the roles of government in an economy. Gillian, tuko pamoja? The roles of government in an economy. Those are the roles of government in an economy. Gillian, kama tuko sawa, tubonyeze yes. Those are the roles of government in an economy. Tafadhali. Thank you so much. So then we have something on a well-labeled diagram is illustrate price ceiling for goods and services. With a well-labeled diagram, look up with a well-labeled diagram that is on 2. With a well-labeled diagram, with a well-labeled diagram. So being told that with a well-labeled diagram, that is question 2, question 2D. With a well-labeled, using well-labeled diagram, illustrate price ceiling for goods and services. With well-labeled diagram, with a well-labeled diagram, illustrate price ceiling for goods and services. Illustrate what's called the price ceiling, and we have it for goods and services. Illustrate what's called the price ceiling for goods and services. Are we discussing price ceiling? Did you discuss on price ceiling? Did you discuss? Yes. So price ceiling is basically set to protect the consumer, where price is basically set below the equilibrium. So you should not exceed that price. Are we together? It is basically set to protect what's called the consumer. So if I was to draw the diagram, I would have the diagram here. So this is price, this is quantity. Price and this is quantity. So price and this is quantity. Then we have demand. So if you're here, we have equilibrium quantity, we have equilibrium price. So the price ceiling, you'll find it here. So this will be the price ceiling. We set it below the equilibrium. Are we there? So that is the price ceiling. So the essence of a price ceiling is basically to protect what's called the consumer. We set it below the equilibrium, and the essence of it is to protect price ceiling. This is now what we call PC. PC is what you have as price ceiling. We set it below the equilibrium, and the essence of setting it below the equilibrium is basically to protect the consumer. Are we together? So price ceiling is also called the maximum price. It's also called the maximum. We call it the maximum price. We also call it the maximum price. The price ceiling, we also call it what you call the maximum price. The maximum price. We also call it the maximum price altogether. Are we together? Imposed below which? Below equilibrium price. Are we together? So the price is basically determined by the forces of demand and supply. Here iko sawa. We respond with a yes. We respond with a yes kama tuko sawa. Naomba tubonyeze yes kama tuko pamoja. Learn the art of responding. Learn. It's a simple art. When you don't understand, Mwalimu say, I don't understand. But let's learn the art of responding. So the next we've been told, number 3, demand and supply function of a given. That's 3A. Demand and supply function. We told the demand and supply function of a given, of a certain product are given as follows. So we have demand, that is QD. So QD, the examiner tells us, is equals to 110 minus 2P. Then you have the QS. QS, we're being told, is equivalent to negative 40 plus 3P. Together, plus 3P. Negative 40 plus 3P. So the government imposed what called imposes. The government imposes, that was a very nice question. The government imposes a tax of 5 per unit. A tax of 5 per unit. A tax of 5 per unit. Are we together? So understand that the tax, number 1, the tax of 5 tax only affects, understand that the tax only affects what you call the supply. tax only affect the supply. Here is the supply function, which is QS is equals to negative 40 plus 3P. Together, negative 40 plus 3P. Negative 40 plus 3P. If I want to make this subject, I understand that 3P is going to be QS plus 40. So I divide both sides by 3, both sides by 3. So we understand that P is equals to Q over 3 plus 40 over 3. Mpaka hapo tuko sawa? Plus 40 over 3. Plus 40 over 3. So we understand that the tax will only affect what's called supply. Tuko pamoja. This is P in terms of supply. Nipatie yes kama tuko pamoja. If you don't understand, yes, tell me, mwalimu, I don't understand. Yes. So equilibrium price after tax. So we have equilibrium price after tax. So equilibrium price after tax. So equilibrium price after tax. So tax price will be, so just understand the tax price will be, so when you talk about the tax price, it will basically be what you have as QS over 3 plus 40 over 3 plus 5. Tax will always increase the value. 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 So that will be the value. Tax will always increase that value. Will always increase that value. I want us. That's why I'm adding. So we say that tax will always increase the price altogether. And so the effect of price of the tax is we are going to add the tax. Tafadhali bonyeza yes. Tafadhali bonyeza da. Yes altogether. Tafadhali bonyeza yes. So we can simplify this information. We can simplify what you have, this information. We can simplify this information. Altogether, we can simplify this information. How do you simplify this information? Look at that. Simplify that information. So 3, if you have an LCM, what is the LCM? The LCM is 3. So 3 goes down, QS plus 40. Then that goes there 3. So 3 times 5, that is 15. Yes, that is 15. 3 times that, we have it as 15. We have as 15. Tuko pamoja. If you simplify this, we're going to have QS. We are going to have QS. We are going to have QS. We are going to have QS. QS plus 40. Plus 40. Plus 15 over 3. Tuko pamoja over 3. Simplify over 3. Over 3. I want us to respond to this. Sorry with this here. Sorry if you have that. We had the price. But so if you have that, P is equals to Q over 3, QS over 3 plus 40 over 3. So we have that. So that this will go to that we have, and then we had plus 5, so plus 5 here. Plus 5 here. So we simplify. This one we had simplified. So we have P is going to be QS plus 40. Look at plus 40, then plus 15 over 3. So this was, if you're very keen, we're going to have P is equals to QS plus 55 over 3. So we multiply both sides by 3 to do away with 3. So these 3 cancel. So 3P is QS plus 55. Gillian. Tuko sawa, Gillian? Gillian, tuko sawa? Nimeshukuru. Please, the art of responding. I would love you people to know the art of responding. So if I have this QS, I take this one to the other side. Understand that QS is going to be 3P minus 55. Are we in agreement? So we're getting the value as a result of supply is going to change as a result of price. Tuko sawa. So we have that. We have that. So this is the QS as a result of change in price. We say that the demand is not going to change. Demand is not going to change. So just come at equilibrium, QS is equals to QD. QS, we have it as 3P minus 55. What about the demand? Equilibrium quantity demanded. Equilibrium quantity demanded. We have 110. 110 minus 2P. Collect the like terms. Bring this one to the other side. So that's going to be 3P. This negative, it changes to positive plus 2P is going to be 110. And you say this one will be, if it closes, it becomes plus 55. So we have 5P is equivalent to 165. So to get P, you divide both sides by 5. You divide both sides by 5. What is P? Get for me P. If you divide that by 5. Get for me P. After tax. So remember the tax will affect the supply. So you're going to add 5. The effect of that is that we're going to add the 5. That's the effect of tax on supply. So what is P? If you simplify that. If you don't know, please tell me, Mwalim, I don't know. But learn to respond kindly. What I insist, learn to respond. Are we here and are we together? So P is equals to 33. So after tax, if there should be 33. But on the other hand, you're being asked equilibrium quantity. You simply replace that. Equilibrium quantity. If I have quantity, I can pick the demand, which is Q is equals to 110 minus 2P. That will be Q. Even if I pick that will still give me Q is going to be 110 minus 2 times 33. So that's Q is going to be 110 minus 66. What is Q? What is Q? That is yours. Would you like to define? Charity, what do you find when less that? Yes. The art of responding, please, after tax, that should be 44. So if that question come, understand when you're told that if tax is 5, the only effect is on the supply curve. So that you form P and you're going to add because tax only affects what you call supply, but not demand. Together. Tax only affect what you call supply, but not demand. So there's another question on that. So being told to explain application of the concept cross elasticity of demand. Application of the concept cross elasticity of demand. So we have application. We call it application. So we have what's called application of what we call of the concept cross elasticity of demand. Did we cover this? That is always my first question. Did we cover that? Charity and Gillian, did we cover that in our class? Yes. Application of the cross elasticity of demand. If you're just very keen and very consistent in class, you shouldn't have a problem in passing application of cross elasticity of demand, application of cross elasticity of demand, application of what is one of the areas of application of what they call the cross elasticity of demand. What is some of the application of what they call cross elasticity of demand? Some of the application of cross elasticity. So one, we know that. What are some of the applications, if we did it in class, of cross elasticity of demand? Applications of the cross elasticity of demand. Application of what we call the cross elasticity of demand. Where are some of the applications of the cross elasticity of demand? Price setting. Perfect. Price setting. So one is price setting. Setting. Price setting. Price setting. Apart from price setting, by competing firms altogether. Price setting by competing firms, by competing firms, by what's called by the competing firms. What do you have as price setting? Sorry, by competing firm. Are we together? Firms need to know what we call the cross elasticity. Firms basically need to know the cross elasticity of product and complement of product, or what we call product and complements. And complements to do what? To plan for production, to plan for what we call for production. So the farm basically need to know the cross elasticity of product to basically plan for what's called production altogether. Understanding of cross elasticity of what we call the cross elasticity. Understanding cross elasticity is important when the government aims to impose tariff, aims to do what? To impose what you have as tariff. It's very important when the government aims to impose what's called tariffs on goods to safeguard, on goods to safeguard, on goods to safeguard and local industry. To safeguard what's called a local industry. To safeguard what you call local industry together. To safeguard what you call local industry. Are we together? To safeguard local industry. So then we can talk about the last one. We can have with the 1 to 3. We can talk about classification of goods. We can talk about classification of goods. And it should give you classification of what we call of goods. Now about materials. So that's the importance of cross elasticity of demand. Give it a yes, kindly. just respond to for free. So we look at that pattern. So I want us to move to question 5. I want us to move to question 5. In the next, we're going to go to consumer behavior, but now we are discussing introduction, demand, supply, and consumer behavior. So that is getting to the cobweb theorem. So describe 4 characteristics. That's question 5. Question 5B. Question 5B. Explain what you have as 4 characteristics of what you call of human ones. Explain what's called 4 characteristics of human ones. So did you talk about that, Gillian and Charity? Characteristics of human one. Explain what's called 4 characteristics of what you call of human ones. 4 characteristics of human ones. 4 characteristics of human ones. 4 characteristics of human ones. They are unlimited, you know. You can't satisfy they are unlimited. Say, 1, they are unlimited. You cannot satisfy human one. They are unlimited. So they vary in urgency and intensity. Vary in what you call in urgency and what you have and intensity. So they basically vary in urgency. So we say keep on recurring. They keep on recurring. Simply keep on recurring. Certain ones are fully satisfied. You can talk about certain ones. Certain ones we say are fully satisfied. Certain ones can be fully satisfied. They're universal, you know. So universal, you know. Whether you're a white person or a black person, you need food to eat. Together, we respond with a yes. We respond to this. Nipatie yes kama tuko pamoja. So the next is on cobweb theory. With the aid of a diagram, illustrate what we call the cobweb model. With the aid of a diagram, we call it illustrate. Illustrate, that is question, with the cobweb model. Illustrate what we call the cobweb model. Did you talk about the cobweb model? Did you talk about the cobweb model? Did you talk about the cobweb model? Malimo is asking, did you talk about the cobweb model? Yes. If you're very keen, you should know that Malimo talked about this, the cobweb model. We talked about the cobweb model, and that is with the illustrate the cobweb model. Illustrate what you call cobweb model. But that one illustrate what you call the cobweb model. 2 marks. That was so small. That was too small. With the diagram, that was too small. I think that question was too small. With that was too small. That was a bit too small. Too small. Are we together? So when you talk about cobweb, it basically explain fluctuations. The word is fluctuation. In terms of fluctuation in the prices of agricultural products. So cobweb theorem basically explain what's called fluctuation in the prices of agricultural product. For 2 marks, no, you cannot draw that diagram for 2 marks. So that will just be explanation. It talks about, it explains the fluctuations in the prices of agricultural product. It explains why there's fluctuation in what called in the prices of agricultural product. Yes. It basically explains why there's fluctuation. Remember when you talked about diagram and we had it moving, we had fluctuation in the prices of agricultural product. Tafadhali nipatie yes kama tuko pamoja. Fluctuation in the prices of agricultural product. So the second talks about limitations of the cobweb theorem. So did Walimu talk about limitation? Yes, I did. Limitations. Na mchangamke tafadhali. Mchangamke tafadhali. Limitations of cobweb theorem. Limitations of what they call of the cobweb theorem. Limitations of what they call the cobweb theorem. Limitations of what they call the cobweb theorem. Limitations of what they call the cobweb theorem. So did Walimu talk about those limitations? Yes, I did. Rational expectation. So one is rational expectation. We call it the rational expectation. One is what we call rational expectation. So as a limitation, we say that on rational expectation, so the model assumes that the farmers base their next year's supply purely on previous price altogether. Are we together? Purely on previous price altogether. Purely on the previous price, and assume that next year price will be based on last year's price altogether. However, does not apply. However, rarely applies. That you see that farmers basically base what you call assume that farmers base the next year's supply on the previous year's price. That is what's called rational expectation. It is not true that farmers, not true that farmers will base their supply in base the supply will that farmers will supply based on what's called previous price, on the previous price. Not true. It's not always true that the farmers will always base their price on the previous price. It is always not true. Are we together? That's what Cobweb talks about. That they look at the previous price. Remember when they get a very good price, farmers supply more. Are we together? That's why you find when they go and supply more, price reduces down. So it's not always true that farmers will always do that altogether. They're saying farmers are likely to see. The next is farmers. Farmers say are likely to do what? To see. Farmers are likely to see it as good year. To see it as what you call as good year. Good year. Or what's called bad year. Bad year. And learn from price volatility. And learn from what you call from price volatility. So the likely that is tied on limited rational expectation. So that is tied on the explanation. Then you have what you call price divergence. Price divergence is unrealistic. This is one. Price divergence. Price divergence is unrealistic. So this divergence of price is unrealistic and are not empirically proven. And are not empirically means practically, are not empirically proven. Are not empirically proven. So the price divergence, what we call the price divergence is unrealistic and are not practically proven. And we say are not practically proven. It is not realistic, and you say it's not basically practically proven, and it is not practically proven. Together, team, and that is not practically proven. We respond with a yes. Another limitation, the third one, another limitation we talk about, it may not be easier or desirable to switch supply. It may not be easier. It may not be easier. May not be easier, or what's called desirable, and say to switch price. So another limitation, it may not be easier or desirable to switch the price. Then we have buffer stock schemes where government buy from. We have buffer stock, what you call the buffer stock schemes. So whereby government will buy from producers, and they're able to manage fluctuations in price altogether. So it limits what's called the price volatility and price changes. That basically limits what's called the price changes altogether. Other factors affecting price altogether. So, when you talk about corporate theory, we say that factors affecting price altogether, there are many other factors that affect price. Many other factors. Just call it many other factors. We say factors that we say that affects price. There are many factors that affect price. If you look at corporate theory, what does it focus on? If you look at the corporate theory, what is the focus of the corporate theory? What is the focus of the corporate theory? Other than decisions to supply, you see, it talks about decision to supply affecting the price altogether. But you're basically saying that apart from decision to supply affecting price, there is what you call other factors that basically affect the price altogether. Are we together? So supply, we understand that supply fluctuation can be minimized. This is a supply fluctuations, we say can be minimized by, we call it importing from what we call from abroad. So the fluctuations in supply, if the government decides to import from abroad, it can basically minimize altogether. We were talking about that prices are basically interfered with by supply factor, but we can solve the issue by importing from abroad. Tuko pamoja. Give me a yes. We respond with a yes. Perfect. So I want us to go to April 2025. I want us to move to April 2025. April 2025. Are we on April 2025? We respond with yes. So explain. The first one is to explain. Question 1A, explain. Explain three basic economic problems. Explain what I call the three basic, and the word is economic problems. Explain what's called the three basic economic problems. Explain what I call the three basics economic problems. Explain what I call the three basic economic problems. What are the three basic economic problems in economics? The three basic economic problems. The three basic economic problems. I have shouted on that. Gillian, the three basic economic problems in economics. The three basic economic. What to produce? Thank you so much. What to produce? What to produce? Next is what to produce. What to produce? What to produce? What to produce is number one. After determining what to produce, so the next should be what to produce. We have how to produce, and we have what called for whom to produce, So what to produce is basically what to produce, because resources are scarce. You must determine how to produce them together. Are you going to use labor or capital? Then for whom to produce? Who are you producing for? But you also have when to produce. You can also add when to produce, but the first three should be what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Hiyo iko sawa? Tafadhali bonyeza yes kama tuko pamoja. Kama tuko pamoja, bonyeza yes. Kama tuko pamoja, bonyeza yes. Perfect. So then we have the next. We're told question 3A. Did you do this question 3A? So 3A, we're being told that Q is equals to 350 is equals to 350 minus 1.5Q plus 70 over P squared. Did I do this question in class? Mwalimu alifanya hii swali kwa darasa. Was I able to do this in class? Make sure you respond. Did I do that question in class? Charity and Gillian. Yes, so we can, that one you can check the class. We don't need to repeat it again. So we move to another question on that topic one. So question 6. State 6 factors that influence price elasticity. Question 6D. 6 factors. We call it 6 factors that influence price elasticity. 6 factors that we call it the 6 factors that we say 6 factors. 6 factors that influence. 5D. 6 factors that influences price elasticity of demand. Price, call it elasticity of demand. 6 factors that we basically understand influence what's called price elasticity of demand. So 6 factors that we understand influence price elasticity of demand. What are these factors that will influence the price elasticity of demand? 6 factors that we understand influences price elasticity of demand. That's a very good question. Elasticity of demand. 6 factors that we say influence what they call the price elasticity of demand. So we have number 1 is what's called time. We have 1 is time. Are we together? If you're very keen on class time, we say that inelastic in the short run, we know that inelastic, and then we understand that in the long run, it is what's called elastic. In the long run, we understand it is elastic. In the long run, we understand that it is elastic. So we have it. In the short run, it is inelastic. In the long run, we understand it is elastic. Then we have price elasticity. We also have what's called degree of necessity. We can talk about degree of what we call necessity. Degree of what we call necessity. We have what's called degree of necessity. So the greater the degree of necessity, the more likely the demand to be inelastic. The greater the degree of what we call necessity, the more likely the demand. So the greater the degree of necessity, the more likely the demand to be inelastic. People don't care. Are we together? The greater the degree to be inelastic, then we have what's called inflation. We can talk about inflation as the next factor. So we understand inflation is persistent, price increase in price. So with inflation, demand tends to be inelastic. Inflation, demand tend to be what? To be inelastic. Inelastic, why? There's expectation of the price to increase. So we can also talk about price elasticity. We can also have price, a factor called price, a factor that is called price. So we say that changes in price influence what's called elasticity of demand. Are we together? Expensive commodities have elastic demand. Are we together? We understand that expensive commodities have what's called elastic demand. Very sensitive. Increase or decrease will always have what's called elastic demand. So in expensive, have inelastic. Not expensive, inelastic. Not expensive, have what's called inelastic demand. Products that are not very expensive, we know they will have what we call inelastic demand. But we have size of consumers' income, size of what we call consumers' income. So if you're poor, the poor will always have elastic demand because they're very sensitive together. So when you say poor people have what we call inelastic. Inelastic, why? Because they're price sensitive. Inelastic demand, since they're price sensitive, since they, we say, are price, the word is price sensitive. They have inelastic demand. Why? Because they're basically price sensitive. Why do they have inelastic demand? Because they are price sensitive. That is 5. We can discuss the last one. Because they're price sensitive. Together. Because they're price sensitive. Because they are price sensitive. Because they are price sensitive. Then lastly, we can talk about possibility of substitution. We can talk about what's called possibility. We call it possibility of what we call substitution. The last one we call it possibility of what we call of substitution. So we call it the possibility of substitution. As that last one we call it possibility, and you're calling it possibility of substitution. So when you talk about possibility of substitution, you're just basically saying that the closer the substitute of commodity, the more likely the demand to be elastic. The closer the substitute of what you call of a commodity, the more likely to be, we call it the more likely to be elastic. 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 We call it the more likely to be elastic. The more likely to be elastic. The more likely for the price to be elastic. Bonyeza yes count. If we are together, we respond with a yes. If we are together on that, if that is understood, we respond with a yes. So then there's a very good question. Describe 5 ways in which government may influence allocation of resources. That's 5B. Ways the government, 5B. Ways the government. Describe 5 ways in which the government may influence. Government may influence. Government, we say may influence. Influence what we call allocation of resources. So what are the ways that the government in economics, how do government influence allocation of resources? Number 1 is through taxation. Are we together? Through taxation. So we say through taxation. Through taxation. One of the ways through taxation. So we can basically raise a huge tax on a product. If we put a huge tax on a particular product, we discourage people from consuming that product altogether. So that is one of the ways that government influence. If the government raises high tax on a particular product, then we understand that for that product, people are not going to go for that product altogether. So then we have provision of public goods. The next provision, call it provision of what we call of the public good. We call it the provision of the public goods. Essential goods and services. This is essential goods and what we call the services. Essential goods and services. Provision of essential goods and services. But you have income distribution through progressive tax. Income, we call it distribution through what's called through progressive tax. Through what's called the progressive taxes. Through the progressive taxes. Income distribution, and we're saying through progressive tax. Income distribution. Then we say through spending. When the government spends, there's money. Through government spending. Through government spending. Call it through government spending. Through government spending. Through government spending. But have what we call equalization fund. That goes to the marginalized. We call it equalization. Call it fund through equalization fund. That will go to the marginalized region. Then we have also budgetary allocation. Budgetary, call it allocations. Budgetary allocation, equalization fund. We have budgetary allocations. And then we say price control. That is price ceiling and price floor. Price control. We have ceiling and what you call the floor. But you also have devolution. We currently have devolution. There is a way of allocating resources. Usually, is that question perfectly done? So there's a question here. There's a question that we being asked. Determinants of supply in an economy. Determinants of supply in an economy. Determinants, that is 5D. Determinants of supply in an economy. Determinants of supply. Determinants of supply in an economy. Determinants Determinants of what we call of supply in an economy. Determinants of supply in an economy. That should be April 24, question 5C. Determinants of supply in an economy. So we talked about determinants of supply. What are the determinants of supply in an economy? Determinants of what we call supply in an economy. Determinants. So we have cost of production. One of the first is cost of production. So if the cost of production is high, supply is going to be low, and then vice versa. We have environmental factors like climate, environmental factors, and we call it such as climate. So favorable climate, supply is going to be very high. Supply is going to be high. But you also have what we call price altogether. Price in itself is a determinant. So if the price is high, supply definitely is going to be high. But you also understand that government policy. Look at the taxes, government policy. So if there's high taxes, supply is going to be low. But you also understand technology. So when you have a good technology, supply is going to be high, and vice versa. So these are determinants of what we call supply. Cost of production. When the cost of production is low, supply is high, and vice versa. Then you talk about environmental factors like climate. If you have a good climate, favorable climate, supply is going to be high, and vice versa. And you talk about the factor price. With high price, supply is going to be very high. Then you have government policy. So we have good policies and bad policy. When you have a policy where the government provides subsidies, then we understand the supply is going to be high, and vice versa for where government raises taxes. And on technology, we have good technology and an obsolete technology. So when you have what we call the presence of a good technology, or better technology, the supply is going to be high, and vice versa for an obsolete technology. Tuko pamoja. So that paper is done. Is there any person who needs to get a breather kidogo? Is there any person who needs a breather, or tuendelee? Kuna mtu anahitaji breather. How many minutes breather? How many minutes? How many minutes breather? Gillian, how many minutes? So you can get the breather. 7 to 10, that should be okay. So we can respond with a yes. So we've been told in December 2024, we look for those questions. So the first one, under that, the first one basically under that, and the first one under that. Now question 4C. Question 3C. Explain for application of concept of equilibrium. For application. 3. Explain for application. That is 3C. DEC 2020. 2024. 3C. Give me a yes if you're that DEC 2024. Question 3C. So it talks about explain for application of the concept equilibrium. Application of what we call of the concept equilibrium. Application of the concept equilibrium. For application of what we have of the concept equilibrium. Where do we apply the concept equilibrium? Application of the concept equilibrium. For application of the concept equilibrium. So where do we apply them? Where do we apply the concept equilibrium? Where do we apply the concept equilibrium? Did we discuss that? Did we discuss that? Did we discuss that? Did we discuss that application? Did you discuss that on the importance of equilibrium? If you remember, on the importance of equilibrium. Yes, we say useful in economic analysis. Economic analysis, we call it economic analysis. Check on the importance of equilibrium, concept equilibrium, since it assists in economic sense. It assists in what's called in economic generalization. Since it does what? It assists in economic generalization. That is the first one. So was our Charity and Gillian, since it assists in economic generalization. The next we say that predicting path and speed, predicting the path, we call it predicting what we call the path, and what's called and the speed of what we call of economic variable. Path, speed, predicting what's called the path and speed of economic variable. Path and speed of economic variable. So then we say comparison of different equilibrium, comparison of what we call of different equilibriums, comparison of what we call different equilibrium, helps in helps in forecasting, helps in what we call in forecasting. So when you compare stable, neutral, and stable, unstable, and neutral, it helps in economic forecasting. It assists in economic forecasting. Together, team. Give me a yes if you're together on that. Give me a yes as I add some ink. So just check on the concept, what you talked about, and talked about the concept. So then we can have the last, we call it useful in welfare economics. Lastly, we call it welfare economics. We use it in the welfare economics. Since it provides guidelines, since we say it provides what we call guideline, what we call the guideline for optimization, or what we call for optimization in what we call in allocation of resources. Optimization in allocation of what we call of resources. Guideline in optimal allocation of resources. Tuko sawa on that. Give mwalimu a yes if we are together. So those are the importance. We respond with a yes. So the next question should be 5. With a well-labeled diagram, differentiate what you call a gently and steep slope supply curve. A gently and steep slope, that is 5K. Gently and steep slope supply curve. Gently, we have what we call gently, and what we call steepy. This is December. I'm saying this gently and steepy, slope supply curve. Gently and what you call the steepy slope supply curve. Gently and what you have a steep slope supply curve. Together, gently and what you call the steep slope supply curve. Gently and what you call the steep slope supply curve. So look at just gently is that, steep is that, but gently would be that. So that's gently, this is demand. So steepy is this, but gently sloping would be this. So a gently, we'll talk about steepy slope supply curve. Look at steep slope supply curve. So when you talk about the steep slope supply curve, are we there? So this is a steepy, and this is gently sloping together. Are you able to see that? Give me a yes. So one is steepy, the other one is gently. So look at this. A steepy will give you what you call, this will provide what you call, this will give what you call a big change in price results. This will give you inelastic. So the word what inelastic supply. A steepy will have what you call elastic supply, small change supply. So that's what you need to show on the difference. So draw the diagram, have those diagrams, and explain. With steepy, we have inelastic supply, where we have a big change, result to a smaller change in quantity supply. But then when you have a gently will result into elastic supply. Give me yes. Liberty, yes. Give me yes. We'll move to the next. So that's question 6. Question 6A. So explain the concept consumer sovereignty. What is consumer sovereignty? Tumalize hii paper. Gillian, kindly allow me to finish the paper. Consumer sovereignty. What is consumer sovereignty? Consumer sovereignty. When you say consumer sovereignty, when you talk about consumer sovereignty, when Malimo talks about consumer sovereignty, what is consumer sovereignty when you say consumer sovereignty? That is freedom of choice. Consumer's freedom of choice. Consumer freedom of choice. Freedom of what you call choice. Consumers' freedom of choice. Consumers are the best judge to determine what they want together. So then we're being told that the next is factors that limit consumer. Factors that limit. We have it limit consumer sovereignty. What are these factors? Availability, of what we call variety of goods and services. So if you don't have variety of goods and services, we know that consumer choice are limited. Together, Gillian and Charity. If we don't have variety of goods, then we know that consumers' choices are limited. Consumers' choices, we understand, are limited. If we don't have variety of goods and services, we understand that consumers' choices are limited altogether. We understand that consumers' choices are basically limited. If there are no variety of goods and services, we understand that consumers' choices are limited altogether. We understand that consumers' choices are limited. We also have market imperfections. Market imperfections, i.e. monopoly. If you have a monopoly produce a unique product. So with production of a unique product, you limit. There's only a unique prop. Monopoly will limit. This will limit sovereignty. Freedom of choice, sovereignty. Then you have consumers' income. A person who has a lot of money, his freedom of choice is expanded. However, if you're poor, you have what's called limited choice. If you're poor, then your choices are basically limited. Then your choices are definitely limited. If you're poor, you understand that your choices are limited. What is another factor that affects consumer sovereignty? Your choices are limited. If you're poor, your choices are limited. Then we can have the last we talk about what we call standardization. If we standardize, standardization of products, standardization of what we call of the product. If you standardize, then you basically limit consumer sovereignty. Together, Charity and Gideon. Then the last question touching on those topics, we have explained application of price elasticity of demand in decision making. Application. We have it application of price elasticity. We call it application of what we call of price, and we call it elasticity of what we call of demand. Application of price elasticity of demand in what's called in decision making. So one is the government. One is what's called the government. How does the government use price elasticity? How does the government use the price elasticity? How does the government use the price elasticity? How does the government use price elasticity in decision making? How does the government use price elasticity in decision making? How does the government use the price? So government getting what we call desired revenue together. Government getting what we call desired revenue together. That is application of price elasticity of demand in decision making. Getting the desired revenue. Getting what we call the desired revenue. And how does that come about? Are we together? So the government will tax more commodity with inelastic. Tax more, and we call it commodities. We say with inelastic demand. We're taxing more commodities with inelastic demand, taxing more commodities with inelastic demand, taxing more commodities with inelastic demand, and taxing less with elastic demand, and less with elastic demand. So that's how government uses what's called price elasticity to get the what we call desired revenue. Then you have a producer. How would producer use price elasticity of demand? How would producers, how would they use that? Setting prices, we can use them in setting what's called setting prices, where we, inelastic, and then we have elastic. So for inelastic, you can increase the price. Increase what's called the price. This one do not increase what we call the price. Then we have lastly consumer. How does a consumer? So this is just setting tax policy. We call it setting tax policy. On that one, sorry. Number one on government setting tax policy, where we say you tax more commodities within elastic demand and tax less with those elastic demand. Then producers setting prices. Uses price elasticity in setting prices. Inelastic increase the price. Elastic do not increase what you call the price. Do not increase what you call the price. Then you have consumer. How do consumers, we say that how do consumers basically apply the price elasticity? We call it price elasticity of demand. So how do consumers basically apply price elasticity of demand? As the last, how do consumers buying decision? We use it on buying decision. Number one is buying decisions. And buying decision, you say that purchasing power. Then you say budget allocation, what's called budget allocations. Two things, buying decisions and budget allocation are we together. So understanding price elasticity help you to consumer to decide how to allocate together. So for inelastic demands, which we say necessity, for inelastic demand, for example, inelastic, i.e. necessity. For inelastic, for example, i.e. necessity, we understand that necessity need to be prioritized. This is need to be prioritized. So you need to prioritize this. Need to be basically prioritized. For those that need to be prioritized, which together regardless of price fluctuation. Regardless of what we call of price fluctuation. Regardless of what we call the price fluctuation, you need to prioritize that. That's how we apply it. So for that paper, we've also done on that. So we can close it there and say, God bless you for showing up. Charity, you've been doing a fantastic job. I am proud of the class and for keeping kindly. Always keep it like when you say we show up, we show up. So God bless you. We can stop at that point. I hope we have enjoyed our class. Let's meet on Friday and then Saturday. I hope now you're getting prepared. Are you getting there, Charity and Gillian? I hope you people are getting there. Thank you so much. And I hope you're getting there. I hope you, as you revise, things are getting better. Thank you so much. We can close it there.